Getting from the ground up.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the CERIAS Security Seminar from Purdue University. Our speaker today is Kevin McPeak from Symantec Security. He is a security and mobility architect focusing on the U.S. government. He serves as a technical SME in a wide range of cyber fields. And we've been lucky to have him here the last 2 days at Purdue, meeting with faculty and graduate students whose research overlap with Symantec's interests. And also, this is his third talk in 2 days. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
Joel stepped up, but I just want to thank Joel so much for the kind introduction. I'd also like to personally thank each of you. I know it's getting late in the day, and you've probably all had pretty busy days so far. So I really appreciate you taking the time to hear my talk specific to the 5 W's of mobile malware, which basically means the who, the what, when, where, and why of mobile malware, and sort of a brief closing notes on what can be done about it. But before I actually jump into the slide presentations, I just want to say, having been here for the past 2 days at Purdue, speaking with a lot of the faculty members in the program and a lot of the students, I realize I truly am amongst great, cyber professionals, and I feel that in this sort of, friendly atmosphere. I mean, you guys are all become family and friends to me at this point. That I feel I can share something at a very personal level, specific to mobile device security, and share what actually happened to me. So I was actually personally targeted by a very skilled and very dedicated adversary that actually targeted my mobile device. This person, I live in Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. This person also lived in Northern Virginia. So here's what actually happened to me. I'm there on a weekend with my tablet doing some Symantec-specific work, and someone in my family said, "Hey, we need to go, run some errands. Can you drive? I just need to run in a store and do something." So I said, okay, and I kind of, pull up in one of the temporary parking spots, and I'm sitting there on my tablet doing some work, and then she comes out, I log off, and later that evening, at the time, my 7-year-old son is now inside of my tablet, and it was a pin protected. I said, "How did you get in?" He said, "Daddy, I'm sitting in the car seat in the back," and he shoulder surfed me. So to my knowledge, that's the only time I've been totally owned. And I told him, I said, "Well, okay, good job figuring that out. And you're now downloading apps and doing all kinds of crazy things." I said, "So give it back to me. I'm going to reset my password. And if you do this again, you're going to get a spank." So that was my mitigation strategy, was to threaten a kinetic response to a future hack attempt. So I told you I would redeem myself from the very bad joke I told this morning that nobody laughed. I'm like, was he trying to tell a joke? So, all right, so let's start with the first W in the series here. Who can be affected by mobile malware? A lot of government agencies are issuing mobile devices to their employees. Some of it is associated with work-at-home initiatives, green computing, reducing TCO. So there has been a proliferation of government-issued as well as concept of BYOD, where certain, and when I say government, it could be federal, state, local, city council, et cetera, where they're being issued various types of devices or using their own devices. Also commercial, from large corporations all the way down to small business to individual entrepreneurs. A lot of work is getting done on smartphones, on tablets, and different mobile platforms. And also home users, and this is where you see a prevalence of mobile devices. I can remember growing up as a child, the whole idea was you go out and play, right? You're out, running around outside getting fresh air. Now, kids, they're all on their little tablets. Pretty much everybody has a mobile device. As long as you're like 3 or 4 years old, you probably have a tablet. So home users, from the youngest parts of our population up to our seniors, are all pretty much owners of, multiple network-connected mobile-type devices, as well as if you think about any IoT, Internet of Things type devices, are all part of this rich fabric of mobile. We're also seeing, even globally, there are parts of the world where a robust telecommunications infrastructure was never, physical wire infrastructure was never quite built out in certain areas of the world. Yet they do have the honeycomb cell tower patterns, so there's a proliferation of mobile devices, people using those for voice data, email, et cetera, whereas before they didn't even have basic telephone communications. So all of those types of users, basically what I'm trying to say is everybody can be impacted by mobile malware. So let's also look at what are the types of platforms there are. Apple iOS, and we'll go into that in a little more depth. There have been known exploits directed against that, as well as Android. BlackBerry has traditionally prided itself on being a little more secure in their platform development, but there have been studies showing at different releases and iterations of BlackBerry having certain vulnerabilities associated with it. Windows has really, I think, reputation-wise, legacy Microsoft, not known as a security company. Microsoft today and Microsoft moving forward has sort of doubled down and made a real commitment to having secure platforms. But the few versions of Windows Tablet back, I remember there was a specific study that DHS had where they actually had some theoretical exploits for Windows platforms. So basically all platforms all have attack surfaces. And the things that make engaging mobile apps so interesting, the rich diversity of mobile apps you can use, the rich content that you can develop and share, all of these things that make using our mobile devices so beneficial to us also increase the overall attack surface associated with them. So again, all types of users, all types of platforms can be part of that who. So let's talk about the other side of the equation, the malevolent actors. Who's creating and distributing the mobile apps? Well, at the high level, it's cyber criminals and their accomplices. There's the malware developers themselves, and there actually are specific ecosystem and microsegmentation components within malware development. So there are those that focus and specialize in malware development for, let's say, for Android or other types of platforms, developing specific payload methodologies. And with this microsegmentation, if somebody wants to develop a specific attack campaign directed against specific mobile devices, they can sort of customize their attack methodology, integrate and procure and integrate these different malware developer systems, integrate them, fuse them, and then use them for an attack method. Also, the botnet systems. The idea is to a botnet to have as many devices participating in that botnet to get that multiple processing capabilities. So if mobile devices can be integrated into a botnet operation or some type of a spam relay system, then certainly that's an appealing activity for those types of operators. Espionage ring. If you look at government or corporate officials, a lot of times these folks are bouncing from meeting to airport to another airport to another meeting, back and forth. Very rarely they're actually logged in. They're relying almost exclusively, a lot of senior executives, both in corporate world and government, relying on their mobile device and doing all their email. So things like their cameras are involved in that. So if a goal is to steal intellectual property or marketing or financial information or sensitive government information, hijack calendars to see what sort of activities are occurring, targeting the mobile devices for either corporate or governmental espionage is certainly appealing as an attack vector. Mules, those who either unwittingly, partially wittingly, or in full knowledge are actually carrying mobile device across international borders or somehow involved in the distribution channels and receiving some type of financial benefit are also part of this malware ecosystem. Cyber thieves, those who are incentivized to find ways to monetize the fact that you've got a mobile device in your pocket. And then hacktivists. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Certainly not trying to get into any sorts of ideological disputes about right and wrong. But at the end of the day, there are people, and we have to accept the reality of it, there are people who feel morally justified in developing a malware payload for either government systems, corporate systems, and trying to impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of those systems. Now, will they attack cloud infrastructure? Yes. Will they attack virtualized environments, data center environments, sort of the crown jewels stored on servers, things like databases, domain controllers, et cetera? Yes, they will. They'll also go after users at their workstation. But the mobile device that leaves the building, that's having communications over the airwaves, it's simply another method for them to attack their target. So hacktivism, certainly a motivational factor. So let's talk about what exactly is mobile malware. How is it actually counted? So specifically within the realm of academia, industry, and government, there have been efforts to develop a collaborative taxonomy, a collaborative framework of discussion of saying this is what mobile malware, and I forget the acronym, but there was a group that was formed between university, government, and industry to try to come up with a common taxonomy so that if one cyber researcher has found a certain type of mobile malware, that they can effectively communicate how bad it is, the functionality with other partners. Unfortunately, no one could come to any sort of consensus, and there was no sort of dictator, so to speak, to sort of cut the Gordian knot and say, no, this is how we're going to do the naming conventions.
So no shared ontology.
Exactly. There was an effort to do that, and it sort of fell apart. Maybe at some point in the future, as things mature, that effort will be reinitiated and come to success. So I can explain you how Symantec, how our naming conventions work, but keep in mind some other things that you might read might use the same words, but the words can mean different things. So if there's a malicious application and it's has a certain function of what it does, Symantec would refer to it as being part of a family. If there's a trivial or moderate modification, we would refer to that as a variant. Okay, so it's still the same payload, still the same function, but they're sort of like think of like software versioning 3.7, 3.8, but then you come out with 4.0, it's something different, right? So mobile malware authors, it's the same sort of thing. There would be a family, and then the iterations would be a variant. Now, nobody goes out to download mobile malware and says, you know what, my tablet is working well, my phone's working well, I think it'd be fun to get infected and destabilize my device, and I'll do my online banking and have identity. I mean, unless you're out of your mind, you're not going to proactively do that. So what they have to do is they have to take the mobile malware component and they have to inject it into some type of a mobile app so that you deliberately download and install it on your mobile device. And why do people put apps on their mobile device in the first place? Well, they do it primarily for two reasons. One is it's something that will increase productivity, so it's some type of enhancement, or it's something fun or beneficial or something of interest for your life. Another consideration is the sort of one-time use scenario. So many people, and our studies have shown this, will download a mobile app and use it just that one time. They have a need for it, and then they'll never uninstall it. They'll get notifications to update. They might have auto updates turned on, or they may simply click through and accept the updates. So they're not even quite sure what they install. They might have forgotten they even bothered to put it on their device, yet that becomes a permanent and iterating part of their mobile framework of their device. I'll give my specific example of my nefarious hacker, my 7-year-old who's now 9. So he plays Little League Baseball. So last season, the coach had some kind of a mobile app for the schedule, the what field we're going to, game cancellations, game delays. He said, look, I'm not doing phone trees, I'm not sending out emails. You want to know what's happening, log in. If you're getting your car to go somewhere, log into the mobile app. I'll only call you or email you if we're moving the time up. But if you show up at the field and the game's canceled or delayed, that's on you. You didn't check. Before you rolled wheels, you didn't check the app. So I get that. When the season was over, I uninstalled that app. But I'll bet you I was the only mom or dad that did that. So other people, if they had a brand new mobile app, they're going to keep that that app running on their system and accepting updates indefinitely. So just something to consider here. So as the mobile malware, the specific variants embed and are embedded into these applications, that same malware packet could be in various different apps. It could be in something like some of the examples here, book reading, some type of a video editing tool, other types of fun things. So we refer to that as samples. So we don't count, when we do, Symantec does reporting on mobile malware, we never discuss the samples. But other companies and other academic institutions, government agencies, et cetera, international participants in these discussions, they may do something very different. So if they see the exact same code embedded in this book sharing app and another one in a video editing app, they may count each one and say, we saw one family, two family, or one variant. They're going to use different terms. They'll use the same words, but mean something totally different. So if they run a report and they say, look, between the month of January through June, Symantec only found 75 families. We found 3,600. Well, no, actually, we found them, but we called them samples, and we didn't wave a flag to say, look at that. We simply defined it different. So why is this important? Not because I want to impress you with how Symantec does their business, but just to understand that as you're learning and reading about what's going on in the mobile malware space, that you kind of have to look at who's the author and what do those terms mean. Because you may enter that reading session saying, I know what mobile malware, what a family, a variant, a sample is, but the author might mean something totally different. So let's look at some of the overall growth here. You can see that 17% of all the Android apps were actually some form of malware in disguise, and that's based on our Norton Institute that does all their continuous study of these. In 2013, the new vulnerabilities associated with mobile devices are 127. In 2014, it actually went up. So what we're seeing is as the platforms evolve and as there's just more variation in what these mobile devices can do, more computing power, more various flavors, the vulnerability count has actually gone up. Now, if you remember my definition for the families and the variants, you can see in the upper and bottom left those sort of charts. So you can see between 2013 and 2014, there's some movement there, right? So there was actually more, specifically for Android, more malware families produced in 2013 than 2014. But keep in mind, the older issues don't go away. It's not like on December 31st, the legacy malware somehow ceases to exist. It's still a cumulative effect. So there's more today than there was in 2013. You also see the sort of the real growth in the cumulative Android mobile malware, the variants, definitely a big spike in 2014. And I'd also like to talk about the concept of grayware that's spoken to on the right. So these are apps that they're not malicious necessarily by their design, but what they do, they inadvertently do things like they end up tracking your behavior, and that accounts for 36% of mobile apps. So you actually have a situation where you have an app developer, they're making their app. They might live on your street. They're not necessarily bad people. They themselves don't think they've done a bad thing, but they've developed an app in such a way that there's collection of your movement or some sensitive information that you wouldn't want that. But they don't feel they've done anything unethical. They have their justifications for why they coded the way they did. So it's not quite as nefarious as a deliberate malicious app developer, but nonetheless, that grayware is not something we want on our respective mobile platforms. So what platform do you think has the most vulnerabilities? So on the left, it shows the operating systems. You can see between 2013 and 2014, we actually determined that there are more vulnerabilities for iOS than for Android, BlackBerry, or Windows Phone actually combined. But on the right, you see the growth of malware specifically for Android. So what I have, you see that equal thing there? That's going to go not equals. So that's a key takeaway here. Mobile malware developers are primarily developing their malware for the Android platform. So there's more theoretical attack surface for iOS, but for a variety of reasons I'd like to explain, they're developing the malware for Android primarily, not for iOS. And part of this has to do with the sort of the cultural framework within Apple users. Most Apple users, they see that red ball with the white number in there, excuse me, and it's almost like Pavlovian. They see that, they'll boom, 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 I know I have an update, and they'll do it. Whereas the basic way that Androids are set up, there's a few more click strokes required. So what we're finding is certain users of Android devices, they'll have updates and they'll leave the updates unupdated. So Android users don't have that sort of conditioning reflex to do their updates. We're also seeing a lot of times, at least in the US, where iOS devices are getting their updates directly from Apple, and they tend to be pretty persistently online, whereas a lot of Android devices are being used on a Wi-Fi only type system. They're not actually, they might be out of their service agreement with their telco, but they're still using it, let's say, at home. A lot of older flavors of Android that are out there, iOS users tend to do the OS updates pretty religiously, but we're seeing just such a what's called fragmentation within the Android space and also the different hardware platforms. There's different Samsung and different companies making Androids. So the other thing is, if you look at internationally, in the US, iOS has a very strong market position. Internationally, Android is one of the real global leaders. So malware developers, again, they're looking at everything, and they're kind of saying, well, what do we want to develop to? We want to go where there's profitability, where there's a likelihood that we're going to compromise users, where we can get some persistency on these systems that won't get updated or patched in such a way that we made the effort of delivering the payload, and then we lose our footing because of an update. So for all these variety of reasons, there's more malware being developed for Android than for iOS. So, what are the different types of mobile malware that are out there? So there's ones that actually can track the user, sort of geolocation. And if you think of it from a national security perspective, if important executives of corporate or government entities are geo-tracked, they could be susceptible to kidnapping or who knows, something terrible. Also children, people that are could be victims of violent crime. All these sorts of things are areas of concern specific to tracking. Even having a discussion, with Dr. Spafford a little bit earlier about geo-tracking of victims of abuse. So if somebody, let's say, was in a shelter or something like that, and they bring their phone with them, and they're a victim of domestic violence, what if the perpetrator that was abusive does, like if it's an Android, if they know their Gmail account, go in and do maps.google.com location history, boom, they can find out who they're staying with, or if they're in a shelter or staying with family or friends, and actually physically go after them. Or they could install some type of malware that will geo-track them and constantly report on their movement. Things about collection of data, both specific to the device and also configuration data. Also, if you're doing online banking or anything like that, trying to snag these sorts of credentials. Traditional threats, things like putting downloaders or some type of backdoor or rooting the devices. Things that would have changed the settings, lower the privilege. It could be also a tiered approach where a goal is to change the settings on your mobile device so that later a more nefarious payload can be introduced to cause additional damage. We talked about madware, so the mobile adware. This is more something that would annoy you, but things like banner ads that pop up that, there's something spinning or purple and flashy colors going off in the background, trying to get your attention, to get you to click on a link to buy something. And the other thing is, a goal of mobile malware developers can simply be to use your mobile device to send out information. So things like sending text messages to like SMS to premium SMS numbers, things like that would incur a charge, so they can monetize and very quickly do things with your device that you then would have to pay the bill for, so to speak. So mobile device becomes active at a time when the data gets collected, anytime that the users are being tracked, if there's content that's being sent out by a bad app, and when the device settings are changed. So specific to when it's collected, there's the IMEI7 and IMSI8, which is sort of like the unique identifier, sort of like the SID for that mobile device. if that's a way that they can then track that device, and even if you power it down and power it back up, and you've changed location, you've gone from here at Purdue, and now you're in, let's say, Texas or somewhere, to say, okay, well, this is where this device is, tracking it by those unique identifiers, also tracking specific users, snagging things like the physical location. I talked about the unique nature of your calendar settings, how that could be certainly something to worry about. Your photos. A lot of people, there's a saying, and I think everybody kind of takes this to heart. Anything you upload to the internet or anything you put on Facebook, it's there forever. And try to really drill this message into young or new users of internet technology, to say, if you have a real physical camera, and who even has those anymore, but you take some pictures and Polaroid and prints out for you, you could put those in your photo album. That's your private, unless somebody burglarizes your home. But if you take some photos and you upload those to the internet or Facebook or something, even if you delete it later, if it's something that you shouldn't have done, it's going to come back and haunt you. So if you know younger people, or seniors that are kind of late to the party with the internet, certainly you want to recapitulate that message to them. But the other thing to think of is, if you take photos with your mobile device and your mobile device is compromised, even if you don't have it synced to share to some cloud architecture like the iCloud, even if you don't email it or upload it to Facebook, you're just like, oh, let me take a picture of Dan, and I don't upload it, but actually what happened is I took his picture, but because my phone's compromised or my tablet, that it was uploaded. So these are sort of considerations then. We talked about hijacking.
That photo can be taken even if you delete it from your phone, because it's still
still resident on the device. Yes, right. So that's a great point too. Mobile devices with data remnants, it's still predicated on the concept of pointers. So even if you're doing a search that says it's deleted, a malware component that has rooted the device can actually go in under that and look for specific file structures, file types. So if something's saved as an image, it can be exfiltrated without. And the thing is, you wouldn't know. Some embarrassing photo could be put out in the public domain and associated, tagged with your name, your location, later come back to haunt you, and you're like, well, how the heck did that adversary, how did this malevolent actor get this picture? I took a picture, yeah, it was something I shouldn't have done, but I deleted it right away. I never put it online. Well, the very fact of putting it on your mobile device was enough to create that problem. Again, having your phone participate in a spam relay system, having unwanted emails going out, sending things to premium SMS numbers, and getting these things on your phone bill. These are all methodologies that mobile malware developers can use to sort of monetize their exploit of your of your device. And again, if there's a low and slow approach to impacting your mobile device, they can deliver something to change certain configuration settings, so they can deliver a secondary payload that, now that they have escalated their privileges, they can install things without your knowledge. So let's talk about mobile malware. Where is it? Because to my knowledge, it's not on my phone, and it's not walking around the room, and people aren't hooking in a USB connector to their phone to upload it. So primarily, it requires the user to actually go out and do something proactive to get it. Primarily, right? There are exceptions to everything. So both the Google Play and the Apple iTunes stores do take a lot of precautions to do analysis when app developers for their specific ecosystem are developing mobile apps. Their goal is to have it uploaded in such a way that it's reviewed, code reviewed, making sure it doesn't have security issues, making sure it's not excessively buggy or unstable, will crash the device or cause some problems. And then they'll release it to the Google Play or the iTunes Store. That's a model, and I'm going to give some examples of where sometimes that system is circumvented by mobile malware developers. But generally speaking, that is a better model than going out to some of these app malls. And this wouldn't be for Apple because it wouldn't install an Apple device, but for Android devices, there are a number of these third-party app stores, And that's where Symantec's research is showing a tremendous amount of malware is infected. So this shows the actual percentages. I don't see any benefit in calling out specific names of app malls. I would say don't take your apps off. If you have an Android device, and this is just Kevin McPeak's opinion, get your apps from the Google Play Store. You don't want to go out to these third-party stores. But the one on the far left, you can see that just shy of 10% of all the apps in their app store have malware on it. And then some of the ones that aren't quite as nefarious, you're still talking between 3 and 4%. So it's sort of like, Clint Eastwood, do you feel lucky? How lucky do you feel? I myself would not, go out to these sort of, dirty malls and download apps. It's probably never a good idea. So it's better to leave this setting on your Android device to not allow downloads from anywhere other than the Google Play Store. That's a setting. I think that's in most Android. That's set by default. I would highly recommend not, turning that toggle to make it. It's a binary choice, yes or no. I would leave that at yes. Require it to be from Google Play. Highly recommend not turning that off. So where's the mobile malware found? So let's just take high architecture. Let's take just a look at this. So in 2018, it's predicted revenues from mobile apps will be around $92 billion. Currently, there are 70 different app stores. The big 5 app stores contain 1.9 million apps. And 25, I mentioned that people download single-use apps. So 25% of apps are downloaded just once. And I've played this games with some of my friends, and friends that are pretty technically competent. I'll say, hey, what kind of phone is that? Do you mind if I look? And I start flipping through, and I go to their programs, and I'm like, what is this? It'll say tool jockey or friend or foe, and it has a picture of a dragon. I'm like, what is this thing? They're like, oh, my kids were doing. And I'm like, wow. I said, do you even know what you've got installed on your phone or on your tablet? And it's amazing that people have things. You wouldn't have something in your refrigerator that this thing's smelly. It's taking up space. I don't know what it is. I'll leave it there forever. But with our phones and tablets, something gets on there. Oh, I don't know what it is. It's better to delete, remove these sort of things, right? I'm not saying anything negative about Facebook. I myself am a Facebook user on my mobile device, but it is the most used app, okay, for at least within the United States for on mobile devices. And again, just part of talking about good cyber hygiene. Keep in mind anything you upload to any social media. This is a little bit drifting off topic of mobile malware, but I do want to just put this out. And I think everyone in this room is aware of this, but encourage others in your communities and in your families. Anything you're uploading on social media, anything you say, future employers or current employers, customers, friends and enemies and such, can look at that. If you have photos and you have the geolocation, can be used to target you. If you're going on travel or vacation, normally it's advised it's not prudent to announce it after. Simply when you get back from the trip, say, hey, I had a great trip in Indiana. Here's some nice pictures from my trip. It just depends on how your threat appetite and how secure you feel your home environment is if you're on the road. But again, just some good general guidance around mobile apps. So let's talk about the why. Why is mobile malware developed? I talked about things like the premium SMS messaging. That's a quick way to monetize and exploit mobile devices. Malware. So companies will pay mobile advertising companies to say, the more clicks, you're going to be in charge of getting me clicks. Here's a promotion I'm running, flower delivery in my community or something of that nature. And if I get, it's tiered. If I get 50 clicks, I'll give you $50. But if I get, 5,000 clicks, I'll give you, more, like $15,000. So the whole idea is to a revenue driving model. So that creates a financial incentive, the advertising thing, to create more of this malware. So that's why that sort of thing is being developed. Plain old-fashioned theft and fraud, the whole idea of stealing your credentials, your banking, your medical, anything, what the government, what they call PII, personally identifiable information. The whole idea is to take over your systems, your communications, snag passwords, snag credit cards, and basically do hijacking, and once successful in doing those types of exploits, to actually go out and then monetize it. Ransomware. This is an interesting one. Mobile devices were a little bit late to the game, but there now are known ransomware components specific for Android devices. They can some types of the initial sort of foray for ransomware. A user would get a sort of a screen lock. Their device would get encrypted, and there would be a law enforcement theme. So it would have like a logo of Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the NSA, and it would say, you have on your, let's say, workstation movies. You have content, copyrighted movies that you've downloaded that you didn't pay for, and so as a result, you have an option. You can pay a fine, like use your PayPal or some other account, or give us your credit card. You'll pay and we'll unlock it. Or, we're going to come to your home and arrest you, and you're going to have to appear in court, and your fine will go from $50 to $500, because we've had to make the effort to come after you. So it's your call. Do you want to? So a certain percent of people go, oh no, I'm in big trouble, and they'll actually, click on it and power through, and now whether the device gets unlocked or not probably won't, right? But who cares? The fact that this is what's occurring. So what we're seeing now is that's actually, and then there's other types of ransomware. Some of it's just very honest with you. It says, there's no law enforcement. It just says, hey, we compromised your system. Just basic facts. Pay or your data's gone forever. And a certain percent of people will succumb to that pressure, that ransom, and they'll pay that ransom to try to get their pictures of their kids, or important work documents or things of that nature. So we did see this now with mobile malware. The very first type of mobile malware that came out that was a ransomware feature, it would actually snap a picture of you, and it would use that law enforcement theme. It would say, you have downloaded inappropriate content, and you're in big trouble because there's imagery and things that you're not supposed to have. So you need to pay this fine right now. And it actually would show your face, and the text would say something to the effect of, we know who you are, we've got your picture, we have your device, et cetera, et cetera. So that becomes an effective method of attack on your device. We did talk about spam relay systems and botnet operations, and integrating not just physical devices, but mobile devices as well. Oh, I went too fast. So here's a pretty neat example, the Android.sumzan. This is so users get an email, and there's a link, and you can download an app. And it basically says, if you're on the road a lot and you're traveling and you don't have a place to charge, if you put this app on and you're driving and you put this on the dash, it does a solar effect where it'll recharge your phone, okay? And isn't that awesome, So you got to get that. So if you install it, it doesn't work it under-promises in major ways, but it then also hijacks your contact information and sends the same message, but this time it will say, let's say Dan gets an email from you, Joel, and it'll say, because you said you would download it. Hey Dan, this is Joel from from your contacts list here. You got to try this. It's working. And so you trust him. He's one of the senior leaders in your program here. So then you download it, and then all your friends it recapitulates, and so you can see how it gets pretty. And it's so this is the crazy thing. Most users get this, they move on to the next thing. They delete it. They don't click on it. But it only takes a certain, and this is how, not just for mobile devices, this is how all malware, and just so many gimmicks in the world, it only takes a certain percent of participants. So if you sort of do this spray and pray, you hit enough targets with your email, a certain percent will click. The wider the net you cast, the more money you get. So this is why we have, if you ever look at your spam folders, my goodness, it's like, you look in the last 2 minutes, like how many, and a lot of them seem tailored, right? Specifically, I'm a New York Yankees fan, and pretty sad, bummed out my team got eliminated. But if you think about it, if something's a little bit tailored for me, talks about the Yankees season, I might be more likely to catch it. So, drifting off topic a little bit here, but if there's some type of a spear phishing, if they get to know a little bit about you and they can tailor something to your mobile device, again, higher rate of possibility that you'll click on it and sort of self-infect. So Instagram. 10 minutes, right? Okay. So Instagram, the whole thing about uploading photos, and as human beings, it's not a bad thing. It's a normal psychological thing that we would like to be popular and people to like us. Nobody wants to be an ogre and have no friends. So along comes an app called Inst-like. Ta-da! So if you download this app, it'll give you 20 free likes on one of your photos that you like. If you provide them your credit card, you can buy more. So if I have a new baby kitten at home, it's so cute, and I named it Fluffy, and it's adorable. I have a little bow in its collar, and I post it on my Instagram, and I get 3 likes, and I'm like, oh my gosh! Like they clearly you're going to like my kitten, so you must not like me. So I better download Inst-like and run my credit card. I want to get this dang thing up to like 530 likes, like do that pretty quick. So here's the thing: you can buy this app, and it will. So I want to just show you the text here. So you do have to give them your login and password, and I want you to look at the lawyers write all the legalese thing. So let's look at the key text. We don't steal your account. Instagram don't allow using API for auto promotion. So our auto liker uses your login and password direct. So you're getting a written guarantee from the app developer. Trust me, there's nothing behind the mirror, nothing nefarious. Well, of course, this is malware as well. Don't worry, he promises not to steal your account. And so how many people fell for this? So Inst-like actually made the top charts here. And you think about it, conceptually, you can see why people, if you understand human nature, why people are doing that. So let's talk a little bit about the Internet of Things and sort of the future, wearable devices. These are things that are measuring, things about our, as biological organisms. It's in its own way a technical system with interlocking subsystems. But things about, all the things, I won't read all the list here, but, things like glucose level for diabetics and, blood pressure and how much sunlight exposure, how many miles did you walk, how many calories did you burn, all of these things. So most of these IoT things wearing around the wrist or something around your waist or what have you, a lot of that is synchronizing in the cloud. So imagine if somebody's targeting you, and if they've compromised your IoT and your phone, they've got you geo-tracked, they've got multiple ways to geo-track you. They have things about your behavior, your patterns of your daily life. It really, from a cyber stalking perspective, can get pretty creepy pretty fast when you think about it. So let's talk about mobile security IT. And, as Joel mentioned, I have a lot of focus in because I live in Virginia, but I'm right outside of Washington, D.C. A lot of my focus is around federal, okay? So federal government, and I think a lot of universities and corporate activities, they'll do user awareness training, and they'll do it on a regular cadence where in order to keep your account, your domain account, your user account active, you have to do some mandatory cyber awareness training. There's usually situations where you click on the right answer and progress, and you get a nice cool certificate, and I know we all print that out and hang it up in our dining room, somewhere prominent so people know you've been cyber trained. So what's happened is because large organizations have been really promoting this, users have figured this out, right? So 90% of users, if they're at their work computer or even at home, because these good cyber hygiene practices are carrying over into home use, 90% will delete a suspicious email if they don't know who sent it. 72% have an antivirus solution, hopefully Symantec, but they'll have at least something on their system. And 78% will think twice about whether to put something highly sensitive online. Look at the difference in the numbers, how wacky it gets for mobile devices, and it makes no sense. It's like all the good cyber hygiene best practices, people throw abandon caution to the wind when it comes to their tablets and their phones. So only if it's hitting your mobile device, only about a little more than half will delete. The others will actually open and check out suspicious attachments. Why? Having any type of security on your your mobile device, about a third, and the willingness to upload to cloud architecture, things that are highly sensitive, it's roughly half for mobile. So let's talk about what can be done about it. So iOS patches direct. Google has a different architectural model. So it will go through the Samsung or others, go through your telco provider. Not saying one model's better or worse than the other, just saying they're different. Okay. So there's a lot of complexity, things associated with the Google model, but if done correctly, I'm not trying to disparage the Google methodology. It's just a different framework, but at least understand what type of device you have and what type of framework. And then when you get these updates and if you confirm they're legitimate updates for specific apps or operating system mobile device version updates, highly recommend you relatively rapidly engage with those, confirm they're valid, and do those updates. For those who really like to get into some of the geek speak and some of the policy, there is NIST Special Pub 800-163. You can Google that and download it from the public domain. And this is actually assists federal agencies that are issuing mobile devices or providing some type of BYOD framework to allow them to do assessment for the security behavior, reliability, and performance of mobile apps. And then there's a program called AppVet that vets mobile apps. Department of Homeland Security also has something called the Car Wash program. But these are basically things where federal agencies, and again, it might not help those in the room unless you're somehow tied with the U.S. federal government, but to do some testing and evaluation. But again, even for your own organizations that you're representing, doing some type of review or doing some research or things of that nature before installing something, really thinking through what exactly you're putting on your system. Mobile security training. So those in a position of leadership around cyber, collectively we're doing a great job of doing user awareness training, but start getting that message out that this applies to mobile devices as well. Having mobile security software, always a recommended feature. And if you're in a large organization, having a mobile device management framework and actually having some managerial controls over those endpoints, especially if sensitive organizational data is touching them, it is a recommended best practice. And with that, I think I'm ending a minute and a half early, so I have
2 full minutes.
Time for questions. I put everyone to sleep.
Any questions for Kevin?
Yes, sir. No, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. You mentioned the AppVet DARPA project, and I wondered how does that work? Are people testing these things, or are they trying to get machines to themselves somehow tested
No,
somehow?
so my understanding is in federal agencies, there are federal employees and probably also system integrators that are developing some what we call GOTS, government-owned type software, mobile apps for specific government purposes. And rather than develop this complex application and have all this expense associated, and then at the very end say, hi, there's a lot of security concerns with this, let's start over. The government doesn't want to waste money, so contrary to popular opinion. So federal IT leadership has said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Iteratively, as you're developing it, run it through the cycle. Submit it to us. We'll give you a quick and dirty report using some of our cyber tools to say, this looks like it's going to destabilize the mobile device, or this has some malicious content associated with it, or it's sort of like that grayware. This is collecting information that there is no government justification or reason to collect. Federal government has a federal employees union that has been very vocal in discussing some of these things around if you issue a government device and you make that federal employee carry it around when they're off duty, because you want to contact them in an emergency, that's okay, thumbs up. But if it's geolocating, that's not okay, because that employee should be able to go off the clock, so to speak. It really doesn't apply to uniformed military, but the federal civilian workforce. To say, look, if they're off the clock, it's none of their organization's business what they're doing, where they're going, concerns about perception and things like that. So that's sort of this whole these types of programs is to do iterative evaluation. So you don't have to develop all the way through. You can sort of catch bugs and security concerns and privacy concerns earlier in the process. Like if you look at the major control for federal IT systems, there's NIST Special Pub 853, Rev 4. Well, the difference between Rev 3 and Rev 4, does security controls for federal IT, primarily was in Appendix J, which did all the controls around privacy. So the federal government is trying to secure federal IT, but also show a lot of respect for the privacy of the federal workforce. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You did mention that all the new apps, they go through a lot of verification and checking before they're put on the app stores. But are the updates of the same apps, do they also go through the same process, or they're directly posted onto the app store?
I believe they do. So both Apple and Google has a project called Google Digital Bouncer that does this sort of validation. But there was an issue where Chinese hackers had impacted. They're estimating somewhere, and this has been in the last 10 days, with 200,000 to 1 million devices, and with something called, I'm looking at my notes here, but something called a brain test. It was an app that if you installed it, it would root the system. If you tried to uninstall it, it would indicate that it was removed, and then it would, on reboot, it would resurface.
And it was in 80 different apps.
Right, it was embedded, right, as a sample.
Different apps had it.
Another thing, which I didn't know about until Dan Sokoler mentioned this to me last night, this number is just staggering. So within China, some of the iOS app developers, they're supposed to download for app development from Apple the Xcode, which is sort of like for iOS and OS 10, like it's a framework for app development. But they were downloading from a site that allowed it to come a lot quicker, the download, and sort of a cleaner, faster way to get it. But it was Xcode Ghost. So it wasn't quite the right system. So what it would do is it would compile the iOS apps using a modified Xcode IDE, and it would then, so when the developers would develop their apps, it then would distribute that through the Apple Store. And it made it through, these apps passed through the Apple's code review process. Because to Apple, it looked like it was developed in their secure Xcode framework, even though it wasn't. So I said big. You ready for a number here? The impact, and this has been within the last month in the news, 500 million iOS users. Why is that number so high? Because it made it into a version of an application. We're probably not familiar with this application. It's called WeChat, W-E Chat. This is one of the most popular mobile apps in China and all around East Asia. So WeChat got impacted, and this nefarious code ended up embedded in that as it went through the update cycle. So certainly not small numbers. That's more than the population of the United States. And what went wrong? The app developers. They didn't use Xcode. They were using this Xcode Ghost framework. So thank you, Dan, for educating me on that last night, because I had missed that. And I tracked cyber news pretty close. That one somehow got by me. So, any other questions? All right, we'll turn the lights out. Head to the airport. Thank you so much.